The sun dipped low over Midian, setting the mountains ablaze in a deep molten orange. Zipporah, daughter of Jethro, moved through the camp like a shadow in twilight, her eyes dark and knowing. She was not like the other daughters. She did not flinch at the bleat of a goat or the sting of a thorn. She was as steady as the mountains that cradled their tents. The whispers of her sisters, full of laughter and curiosity, spoke of the stranger by the well, the man who had come from the land of Egypt, his face weary but his spirit unbroken. Zipporah had watched him, her gaze sharp and piercing. Moses, they called him, a man who walked like he carried a weight that could not be seen. In the evening, Zipporah's father Jethro, the priest of Midian, welcomed the stranger into their home. Moses, with his wild hair and eyes like storm clouds, spoke little, but when he did, his voice was heavy with stories untold. His presence filled the tent with a tension that wasn't fear but something deeper, like the earth before it trembles. As the days passed, Zipporah watched Moses from afar, her eyes steady and questioning. She saw the way he spoke with the sheep, the way he stared into the flames at night, searching for answers in their flickering dance. There was a restlessness in him, a fire that had been smothered but not yet extinguished. One evening, as the shadows stretched long and thin, Moses approached Jethro. "I have no land, no people of my own," he said. "I have fled from Egypt, and I seek refuge here." His eyes, dark and deep, met Zipporah's. In that moment, something unspoken passed between them, like a thread drawn tight between two hearts. They were married beneath the stars, the desert wind carrying the scent of sage and myrrh. Zipporah's hair, long and black like the wings of a raven, flowed over her shoulders as she stood beside Moses. The night was filled with the sound of drums and laughter, the crackle of the fire reaching up to meet the heavens. Their union was a binding of two worlds, two paths intertwined by fate. She looked into his eyes and saw a man both strong and fragile, a man who bore the weight of a future he had yet to understand. The years passed like sand through the fingers, and the call came for Moses to return to Egypt. Zipporah felt the shift in the air, like the first crack of thunder before a storm. Moses had spoken of a burning bush, a voice from the heavens, a command to free his people. Zipporah, now a mother with their son Gershom at her side, knew the path would not be easy. She could see it in Moses' eyes, the way he stared out across the horizon, his face etched with determination and fear. They packed their things, leaving the familiar comfort of Midian for the uncertainty of a road that led to Egypt. They traveled through the wilderness, the night swallowing them whole, the stars watching like silent sentinels. Moses walked ahead, his steps heavy, his thoughts heavier. But something darker followed them, a shadow that clung to their path, unseen but felt in the marrow of their bones. Zipporah sensed it, her heart beating in a rhythm that was not her own. There was a presence, a foreboding like the air before a storm breaks. She looked at Moses, his face drawn and weary, and felt the fear rise in her chest. She could not name it, but she knew it was real. That night, the darkness came down upon them like a shroud. Moses felt his body convulsing, his eyes wide with terror. The air thickened, and Zipporah knew in her bones that the wrath of God was upon them. She had heard the stories of a jealous God, one who demanded obedience, and she felt that anger now, hot and searing, like a fire that consumed all in its path. She looked at Gershom, their son, innocent and unaware, and something clicked inside her. A memory, a whisper of a tradition, the circumcision. She had heard it spoken of among her people, the covenant of the Hebrews, a mark that set them apart. And she knew, with a sudden clarity that cut through her fear, what needed to be done. With hands trembling but determined, Zipporah took a flint knife and approached Gershom. Her breath was shallow, her heart pounding like a war drum. She could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her, the weight of life and death hanging in the balance. With a swift motion, she performed the circumcision, her breath catching as she felt the warmth of the blood on her hands. She took the foreskin and touched it to Moses' feet, her voice steady but fierce. "Surely you are a bridegroom of blood to me." The air seemed to shudder, the weight lifting, the darkness retreating like a tide. Moses' body stilled, his breath returning, his eyes fluttering open. The wrath had passed, but the memory of it clung to them like a shadow. The camp was silent except for the soft crackle of the fire. Moses sat up, his face pale but his eyes clearer than they had been in days. He looked at Zipporah, a mixture of gratitude and awe in his gaze. She had saved him not with strength, but with a courage born of love and instinct. They did not speak of it, not that night, not for many nights after. But the bond between them had deepened, forged in the fire of a trial neither had expected. Zipporah carried on, tending to their son, guiding their small family through the wilderness with a quiet strength that did not seek recognition but commanded respect. The road ahead was still long, and the shadows of Egypt loomed large, but Moses and Zipporah moved forward together. The whispers of the camp, the doubts of those who did not understand, they no longer mattered. What mattered was the path they were on, a path guided by a God whose ways were not always clear, but whose presence was undeniable.